Dr. Zeke Emanuel, welcome to the show.
It's my pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
You have such an illustrious career. I'm so excited to get into your work and to celebrate your new book, Eat Your Ice Cream. But first, I love to just dive right in. You argue that your thesis is essentially maximum benefit, minimal effort. So what would you say are the biggest high ROI levers that people can pull for better health today?
Friendship.
Friendship.
The single biggest lever you can pull. Yeah. Social relations. Aristotle said 2,500 years ago, man's a social being. Yeah, we're a social animal. And that forebrain of ours, that's brand new, is all about communication. It's about collaboration. And we know that the ROI for actually having close friends and more close friends and spending time with them is very, very high. So, not having friends, being socially isolated, is the equivalent of 15 cigarettes a day. Conversely, if you're 50 and older, we've done this study in the United States and followed people. Those people with more friends, deeper relationships, so more time together and stuff, over the next 8 years, get 8 years of, or 24% decline in mortality. So the single biggest thing you can do is keep your friends close and actually interact. So your brothers, your sisters, and your closest friends. Usually you make them in college. But
wow. Are we becoming less disconnected today?
No.
Are we less disconnected, or are we?
No, more.
More?
Yes. The number of people with 0 or 1 friends has gone up from 6% to 19% over the last few decades. The number of meals we eat alone has gone over 50%. No, it is not a good direction. Now, there are 2 contributing factors, but they contribute. They're not the only factors. One is obviously the cell phone, and the other is COVID. We lost the skills of how to talk to each other, of how to initiate a conversation. And we all walk around with prejudices. It's prejudice. Well, if I initiate, they'll think I'm some kind of dork and they won't want to interact. Wrong. If I initiate, I won't learn anything. It'll be boring and wrong. We almost always enjoy the conversation. And so I think we have these biases, and they're almost invariably wrong when you approach people. If you just talk to someone, you can have a nice conversation. And it's happened to me a zillion times. I'll give you sort of my favorite just because it happens so much. So a lot of the Uber and cab drivers in Washington, D.C. are Ethiopian. Turns out Washington, D.C. is the second largest Ethiopian city in the world after Addis Ababa. I get into a car with a driver and I say, "Where are you from?" Or I ask, "Are you from Ethiopia?" And they light up. Someone knows my country. I said, "I've been there 5 times." And we start talking about geography. So how much family do you have there? Where's the family live? How long ago did you come? And you can then have, sometimes it goes into politics. Sometimes it goes into, what's happening to their family. Sometimes it gets to health because they talk about, what's happening to their kids or something. So you can have a great conversation, and it costs you nothing. And sometimes it's fascinating. I had a guy who clearly well-educated, had a master's in computer tech, and he was going on and on about the current regime in Ethiopia, and I learned a lot about the politics that I hadn't understood. So
that's fascinating. How far out of your way would you go for a social interaction?
I don't know exactly what you mean. You sit down next to someone on the airplane. I just flew out here to L.A., okay? Guy next to me is from Spain. We were talking about the design of seats and the design of aircraft. I don't know.
Wow. That's fascinating. Yeah, I mean, I work from home, so I often will make an effort to leave my house almost expressly for those micro interactions with the barista.
Exactly. The barista's a great one because you can talk to them about making, what's their favorite bean. There are all sorts of small questions you can ask that you think, well, they don't really. Yes, people like talking about themselves, and you can learn something from them. One of the things I often ask is, how do you make that hard? Could you teach me how to make that hard? Because I'm terrible at it.
I love it. No, I mean you're obviously you're a very friendly, affable dude.
But this turns out to be true even for introverts. So a lot of people say to me, after I began talking about, well, introverts, introverts, this isn't good. They're uncomfortable to interact with people. Turns out absolutely false. So there's a professor at Chicago, but lots of different people have done these similar studies where they take people and they say, all right, on the commute, do your normal commute, and then they assess their sort of satisfaction and pleasure with the commute. Then the next week they say, all right, on this commute, you have to talk to one person and have a conversation with one person, and then they assess it, and they look at extroverts and introverts. Turns out both of them enjoy it more when they talk to someone else, and even introverts who act extroverted like the commute more. It goes faster. It's much more pleasurable to them. And so even when they force themselves, quote unquote, turns out it's actually better for them. So
that's so cool. Well, the elephant in the room is social media. What about parasocial relationships? Is there any evidence that parasocial relationships, those digital relationships that we have?
Yeah, think about your digital relationships. The ones that go well, that are enriching, almost exclusively are ones that were face-to-face before, and then, my best friend lives in L.A. or from college. He lives in L.A., right? I don't get to see him that much, maybe once a year. I am going to see it tomorrow night for dinner. But, so we talk and we, email to each other. Yes, once you've got an established relationship, you can enrich it by being on social media and talking on the phone. But if you don't have that kind of relationship, it's hard to establish. We've also learned this all through COVID. Hard to establish, good working teams at the office if everyone started out, not knowing each other and were thrown together on Zoom. It just doesn't work. And I know this as a professor when we had to go to online education during COVID. It was like classes just never worked, and it just wasn't students weren't as engaged, and I wasn't as fulfilled by teaching them.
What about younger generations? I've seen a few headlines pop up describing what could only be described as a sort of stare evoked by Gen Z, the Gen Z stare. Allegedly, they're so chronically online that they've, according to these headlines, I don't know whether or not this is true, but they've essentially forgotten how to interact socially.
Well, I think that goes to an incredibly important point that we don't realize. Yes, we're social animals. That's biologically built in. But the mode of social relationships, the sort of culture of it, the customs that are associated, very different culturally, right? I mean, the Japanese have a very formal choreography to their interactions. We're much more casual. The French kiss you on 3 sides or whatever. It's very different. And that is all cultural. That's something you learn by interacting with people. And it is 100% right. One of the things we've noticed is that people who went through COVID and also have heavy dependence on social media, they've lost that ability to figure out what the norms are of how often can I stare into your eye? How do I shake? Or who's it appropriate to hug, right? Those things are socially determined, and if you don't have them and you haven't seen people do it, you lose that skill. So absolutely right.
Is it analogous to like a muscle, though? We have muscle memory. You take some time off from the gym, you might lose a little bit of strength, but it tends to come back fairly rapidly.
I don't know about muscle memory. If you don't learn it, that's a problem. But it is very much, most of the things are use it or lose it, right? Brain, same thing, use it or lose it. Muscles, same thing, use it or lose it. So it probably is that, and you have to get comfortable doing it. Look, I'm now a much more extroverted person than when I was growing up, okay? Just a fact. And partly because my dad was very extroverted, and he embarrassed me. And so I was like, no, I'm not going to do that, right? And then I learned the lesson. He's right. Being extroverted is a lot more fun. People are enthusiastic. You learn things from people. You can do interesting things with people. You can make friends and, go out for walks or whatever, hikes. And so I do think it's the kind of thing you can learn. I figured out from my father. My father, he had this great line. He says, so someone shuts you down. They don't want to talk. What have you lost, right? I mean, is your ego bruised? Are you, have they cut your skin? No. So just, let it roll off your back. And he was great at that. And I learned a lot. I didn't do it for many decades, but, I eventually learned it. And he's 100% right. What do you lose? Nothing.
What are the most significant changes that you made to become more extroverted?
Willing to put myself out and initiate. I think that's the biggest thing. It's that initiation and starting the conversation. And it's so simple. You just can ask a simple question. I'll give you another example. My research assistant who worked with me on the book moved into a new apartment right across the street was a new restaurant. He went to the restaurant eating all by himself at the bar. And he said, "This is ridiculous. I just worked on a book that said this is the wrong thing to do." And he asked the barista, new restaurant, what did you do before you came here, right? Simple question, not complicated. Ended up, they were engaged in a 45-minute discussion. Turns out she's getting a master's in healthcare administration. He's a health policy guy, so they have a lot to talk about. 45 minutes, and he said he felt great when he left the restaurant, and he hadn't anticipated any of it. So that's the kind of thing. You don't have to have a whole series of questions. I think the thing you have to do that I say in the book is start with a question about them, follow up, listen to it, and respond so that they know you're actually engaged. They're not just talking and you're thinking about something else. How am I going to get out of this or whatever, right? And then have do follow-up questions that just come right out of the conversation. So,
fascinating. Now, how do the benefits of socializing stack when compared to diet and exercise?
They're more powerful. So, one of the the longest study ever done is the Harvard Adult Development Study. Talk about a boring title. You never have that title now. But it began in the 1930s. And John F. Kennedy, President Kennedy, was in it. Ben Bradley, who was the editor of the Washington Post during Watergate, was in it. So they enrolled Harvard sophomores. They wanted to figure out what leads to a good life. And then they enrolled some kids from the inner city who weren't as privileged as the Harvard students. They put them together, and eventually they included their kids and things. And it's been going on for 85 years. And the single biggest predictor of a long life, a healthy life with fewer disabilities, and a happier life is strong social relationships. So you ask, how does it compare? It's more important. And then, there's more than 3 million people who have been involved in studies about health and social relations. The other thing that is people say, well, it's all in the head, psychological. No, it's biologic. Being socially isolated affects about 75 different genes. Feeling lonely affects more genes, and those genes are related to inflammation, cardiovascular disease, a lower response if you get an immunization from a vaccine or a viral infection. So there's real physiological changes that happen when you're lonely and when you're socially isolated. So it's not just all in your head, it's actually in your body.
Wow. You frequently rail against what you call the wellness industrial complex. What would you say are the biggest and most maddening distractions perpetuated by the quote-unquote wellness industrial complex as you see it?
Well, the most maddening thing is a sort of tendency to look at either bad data or data in worms, mice, rats, and then say, oh, you should be doing this, whatever this is, take this supplement, or, you got to work out in this way, or these peptides are going to help you. And that's all mostly a crock of shit, frankly. And it just maddens me how they go on about it. And then, there are other specific things like lots of protein, 2 grams per kilogram of protein. Baloney, don't need that. And so I think it's those over claims with very, very little data. I like to be data driven. I also like to be a little skeptical. So one of my, I would say, psychological characteristics is if it's a fad, I'm against it. Now, some fads turn out to be true. I was just, red light therapy. I feel like, what? You actually read the stuff on red light therapy. The most important thing about it is no harm, right? Doesn't cause DNA damage, doesn't really cause any burning on your skin, etc. Okay, so if there's no harm, what's the upside? Well, there's upside and probably does do good things for baldness. I could have used it. Good thing for some pain relief. Good things for neurological pain and healing of ulcers on the skin, especially, or wounds. And the other thing I learned, and this is just sort of in the box of how do you learn this? Well, in the early 1990s, NASA sent up astronauts to grow seeds in space. They wanted to see how seeds would grow in space with zero gravity, and they had a red light. And the astronauts saw and observed that their hands, with the nicks and the scrapes and stuff, healed much faster when they were under the red lights.
Wow.
And taking care of the plants. Brilliant. Now we have about 3,000 studies of red light. Unfortunately, they tend not to be good. They tend to be small. They're not randomized. And I don't understand why we don't study this more, because we have a lot of people with skin ulcers, diabetics in particular, wound healing, and things like that. And we have a lot of people with long COVID. And I'm like sitting there, I was studying this stuff over the last few days. And I'm like, you got millions of people with long COVID who would love a trial that might give them energy, might help them feel better. Why don't we just, and it's easy to get them and easy to randomize them, and just give them light therapy and, 5-10 minutes a day and see if it makes a difference after 3 months. Not a complicated study, but we don't, we're not doing that.
Wow.
And it's pretty stupid, it seems to me.
I love that that's what you brought up, because that's the one modality that I'm like most skeptical of.
Red lights?
Red light therapy, yeah.
Me too. Look, as I said to you, I began this. If it's a fad, I'm against it. That's my initial bias. But I'm data driven, and so I said, all right, let's look at the studies. And there's actually a couple of big reviews, one last year and one what's called the Cochrane Collaborative, where they look at all the studies that have been out there. And there's areas where there's moderately good evidence, like I said, hair loss, wound healing, pain, where, there are some other things, and who knows, athletes, recovery, etc. But the positive thing is, this isn't going to kill you. It's not going to cause problems. It's not going to cause DNA damage. Very different than the sort of peptides people are pushing, and produced in China, often contaminated. We have no idea what they really do. And so, I think red light therapy is a lot safer than taking peptides.
And meanwhile, people are injecting peptides.
Yeah, believe me, there is plenty of insanity. I've sat on several, pitches for companies that wanted investment.
I mean, I've had some medical doctors on the show who, and I had spine surgery about a year ago, and my neurosurgeon is a fan of peptides. He's seen clinically where they can, help with healing, but I recognize that there's not a lot of human clinical data. But and I've experimented with them, but I can honestly say that I haven't really felt anything. There was no harm that I was able to perceive in my little N of 1 experiment, but I can't really say that I had a benefit either.
Yeah. And it's hard with N of 1 to really know unless it's a home run.
Yeah.
Right.
So interesting. You argue in your book, Eat Your Ice Cream, that longevity shouldn't necessarily be a primary goal. What should be, in your view, our primary goal when it comes to our wellness habits?
Well, I think when it comes to our life, it should be having a fulfilling life. And if you ask yourself, well, what's a fulfilling life? It almost always tends to be helping people and making the world a better place. If you look at people who have rich lives and you say, wow, they must be really doing well, it tends to be people who are out there helping others and not just preoccupied with themselves. They're not narcissists. Narcissists tend to be not nice people. And so I think that's a critical aspect of it. The other thing is, wellness, a lot of the behaviors, exercise, sleeping, eating well, interacting with people, they're pleasurable. It's like I love to ride my bike. I love to ride my bike in nature. I like getting that speed up. And, so the activity itself should be pleasurable. It shouldn't be punishment. It shouldn't be self-denial. And I think too much of wellness in this era, people sell it as sort of a lot of punishment and self-denial. It can also be quite, collaborative and an area where you can share social relationships. I like riding with my wife. I like, hiking with friends. I like having dinner parties and having people over and having good conversations. All of those are, parts of wellness activities, and they can be fun. And the other thing, I think, most of the influencers don't. You can be virtuous. You can be a good person because, if you talk to someone on the airplane or on a train or your barista, you're elevating their mood too. It's not just you who get the benefit, they get the benefit. And that, I think, is something we don't think enough about, that, a lot of these activities can be mutually beneficial.
It's so true. But I mean, when it comes to, like, I'm right there with you when it comes to the value of socializing. But, we have a lot of you're an expert in public health. We have a lot of public health conditions today that are rampant in terms of their prevalence. And they, are by and large diet and lifestyle mediated.
Yes.
Obesity, 42% of the American population isn't just overweight, they're obese. We have record lows when it comes to recreational, like leisure time physical activity.
Yeah. Those are two things that, I point out in the book, incredibly important things to address. And especially, I don't know how many parents or grandparents listen, but, you got to inculcate the habits of doing these things in your kids and feeding them correctly. One of the problems is you look at the diets of most children in America, highest country in terms of ultra-processed foods. 70% of the calories kids eat are ultra-processed foods. You want to talk about poisoning them? That is terrible. And on this, I don't agree with everything Maha pushes on the diet, but I would say 70 or 80% of what they say is true. And they're right, too much pesticides in there, too much ultra-processed foods. You need more natural foods, fruits and vegetables. So I think that's absolutely right. And then getting out. I was just reading something that's like participating in a sports activity now costs $1,000 on average. A baseball team or a soccer team, especially if you're getting good and so you're in one of these traveling teams. That's ridiculous. That excludes so many kids. But we want and need kids to play. And I know that, when we were growing up, my mom would shoo us out, go play. All right, figure it out. And one of the things that does is it forces you to negotiate. All right, what are we going to do? We're going to play basketball. We're going to do go-karts. We're going to ride bikes. So that there's a lot of other things that happen when you just let kids out, no helicopter parents, and have them figure it out and play physically.
Yeah, it's so true. Where does the name of your book come from, Eat Your Ice Cream?
Well, I had found this study. The Atlantic ran an article in October 22 or something on ice cream being actually good for you. And I ran down the article and I looked at the studies. And there's a really important study from 2014 in the biomedical literature that looks at various dairy products and type 2 diabetes. And it turns out that eating ice cream reduces your risk of type 2 diabetes. Go figure, no one thought so. And then there's a bunch of other things. So when I was writing the book, I have become a big dairy fan. There's a lot of good things from dairy.
I agree.
Some people don't fully agree, but I think in general it's a positive. The original title to the book was "Don't Be a Schmuck."
I love that.
That's what my father used to say to his kids. Slap us on the backside of the head and say, "Don't be a schmuck about whatever it is."
That's what my grandma used to say to her grandkids.
And then the publisher was like, "Well, that's a little negative. We need a positive." And so we sort of thought and noodled, and nothing really worked. And then one of the people who was the agent on the book said, gave a few possibilities, and Eat Your Ice Cream was the clear winner. So she's the one who actually came up, but that obviously came from the book.
I love it, and it's a New York Times bestseller. So would you say that ice cream can help prevent type 2 diabetes, or do you think it's
Yes.
a situation where it's correlational, not necessarily causal?
Well, look, almost every diet study is inherently going to be correlational, especially if you're going to try to talk about diet habits over time. You're never going to randomize people and say, "Oh, we're going to follow you for a decade, but you got to stick to this diet and you can't have any of that ice cream stuff." So, of course, they're going to be correlational. Do I think it's potentially causal? Yeah, because I do think that there's things that dairy does to the gut that are really important, and it seems to go. It's not just ice cream. It turns out yogurt's probably better, mostly because it's probiotic and got a lot of bacteria that are good for the gut. So I would go with yes. Plus, it's happy making. It's joyous.
It's soul food.
So why shouldn't you enjoy yourself, even if it turns out to be totally neutral? Enjoy yourself. Have fun.
Well, when I saw those headlines, they reminded me of the headlines that many of us have seen over the years, suggesting that moderate alcohol is actually beneficial from a health standpoint, which is like kind of paradoxical because we know that alcohol is a carcinogen, it's a neurotoxin. So what is it about alcohol? Is it just the fact that people who have more time to leisurely spend with friends, enjoying a glass of wine, is that the causal mechanism? Is it because people who are able to be moderate with indulgences like alcohol, like ice cream, are then doing other things in their lifestyles that are leading to the health benefits that we see?
So it's not clear that moderate alcohol is beneficial. I think the current prevailing view is that it's zero, but I think that's also unrealistic. 65% of the population drinks, and you're not going to get that down to zero. So you have to put it in context. Plus, human beings have liked alcohol since they became human beings, and it turns out primates like it. They look for the fermented fruits that have fallen down and they've got alcohol content. Birds like it. They also look for the fermented fruits. So there's probably something appealing biologically about it. The second thing is if it's moderate, right, and you're social with it, it's probably net. You have to balance these things out. You can't be too extreme one direction. Now, there are things you should not do, right? Binge drinking, no, it's bad. Drinking alone, not a good idea. Drowning out your sorrows, not a good idea. But if you have 3 drinks a week, it's probably fine.
And is there a specific type? Is it red wine preferable? The polyphenols.
That whole thing about the French paradox. It's red wine, never proven. And the resveratrol that GSK bought it for $750 million, and I think made zero.
Kind of a dead end.
Yes, total dead end.
Huh. So yeah, that was a bummer. I remember the fervor surrounding that molecule. Yeah. If someone only had 30 minutes a day to invest in their health, how should they spend it?
Only 30 minutes a day.
Yeah,
well, I think
people are busy.
Yeah.
In this economy?
You should have a good breakfast, okay? Spend time with friends. I don't know whether that's counted. And do some short bursts of intense exercise. So if it's just 30 minutes, which, that works out to 3.5 hours a week, short bursts, 10-minute bursts of intense physical activity, that would be fine. That would be 70 minutes a week of vigorous activity, which is exactly what you need. Having a good breakfast would help, and then spending some time with friends.
Define good breakfast. What does a good breakfast look like?
Well, I'll tell you what I have, and it covers all the bases. I have between 1.5 and 2 eggs a day. 1.5 is I make a 3-egg omelet and split it with my wife. That's how I do that. Eggs, very good in protein. They're good in almost everything but iron. And then you have a bowl of fruit with some granola on it so that you've got the oats, good on the fiber. You put hemp hearts on there, good with the protein and omega-6s. And then you include yogurt, kefir. You've got the more protein, more good fats, and you've got probiotics. So that and if you can only do one of those, do the yogurt, fruit, and granola and hemp hearts, because that's really got everything. And the major thing Americans are deficient in is fiber. 93% of Americans don't get enough fiber because we don't eat enough fruits and vegetables.
How many grams of fiber per day are you targeting?
About 30, 35.
Huh.
And it's not that hard. If you want a snack, don't eat the muffin or the, cookies. Eat nuts or eat hummus and carrots or something like that, or apples and cheese. Those things, they have fiber, they've got protein, they've got a lot of advantages.
I'm so glad you brought that distinction up, because there is the trend now, people are talking about fiber maxing. And no, this is something that I've actually wanted to discuss on the podcast. I'm a huge fan of fiber, but when the fiber comes from whole foods, I think there's this misconception that the fiber that's added to ultra-processed foods has the same benefit as fiber that we get from fresh fruits and vegetables. And I don't think that that's the case. I don't think that fiber, like protein, has benefit in isolation. I think protein has benefit in isolation. But fiber, I think when it's just like, it's a godsend to manufacturers because it costs pennies, right, to infuse ultra processed foods with this like these cheap fiber extracts. Then you're able to make a health claim on the front package label, right? But I don't think that the fiber, I think that all of the epidemiology that we see about the health benefits of fiber, the longevity benefits of fiber, come from people that are getting fiber naturally from whole foods, from fruits and vegetables.
The fiber in that's added typically is something like inulin, and you get the same fiber over and over. Part of what you get from getting it from fruits and vegetables is you get a lot of different fibers, different sizes, different kinds of fiber, and that's way better for different bacteria, as you might expect. So
yeah, and it also traps some of the energy, the metabolizable energy in food.
Right. It slows your glucose uptake so you don't get these spikes and then these rapid declines. Absolutely. So one of the paradoxes would be, well, there's lots of sugars in fruits but it doesn't seem to spike the way, say, a juice does, a fruit juice does. And the reason is all this fiber that often gets taken out from the juice slows the uptake, exactly as you point out.
It's crazy to me. We now have fiber-enriched sodas.
Yeah, ridiculous. Totally ridiculous.
It's crazy.
Totally. Yeah. I was just by a Dunkin' Donuts. Protein. It's like, well, give me a break. It's like.
Well, the fiber is just crazy because it allows manufacturers to charge a premium.
Yeah.
And the inulin extract, the chicory root fiber, the tapioca fiber, like it's dirt, cost pennies.
Yes. If that.
If that.
Yeah.
Wild. I'm glad that you brought up eggs. I mean, you've seen the tide turn, right, at this point, over the course of your career. Yeah. I mean, isn't it in a way kind of a crime that eggs for so many decades were vilified?
Yes, because they've sort of, the prices wobbled, but on a per penny basis, very, very nutritious. As I said, they have almost all the nutrients you need except for iron. They're very good in protein. One egg has about 6 to 7 grams of protein. So it's a really good source of nutrition. And, way better than the alternatives. What are you going to eat for breakfast? Pop those waffles into the toaster, or cereal, which are nowhere near as nutritious as eggs.
Where do you draw the line between optimization and what I sometimes call optimization theater?
I don't know what optimization means. We don't know what optimization is. I'm a big, just to be moderate. Nature did not create us to go to extremes, and you can see this in the immune system, right? Your immune system overreacts. Well, you've got autoimmune diseases, which are really, really terrible. It underreacts. You're prone to infections and lots of problems. So the body mediates things so you don't go to extremes, right? The moment you go up on something really high, right, the body decreases. So you stimulate things over and over again, right? You get insulin resistance. Right, the receptors go down. You don't have as many receptors. The body down-regulates because it doesn't like overstimulation. So I think this idea of something is good, a lot more of it's better. Terrible idea, not biologically sound. So I don't know what optimization means, and I don't know how we can figure out what optimization is for any individual.
Well, body composition.
Yeah, but the things we want to look at, aging of the body. Well, none of the metrics we have for supposed aging of the cells really tell you how old the body is. All this stuff of, how biologically old are you is like, we don't have really good metrics for that.
Well, what do you think are useful biomarkers then, like to assess one's own health?
I will tell you, I don't follow anything except I look at my VO2 max. And that's how well your body uses oxygen to produce energy. And
how do you measure that?
Well, you have some measures on your watch. I have a measure on my watch. It's pretty shitty, to be perfectly honest. So I had it. My watch says my VO2 max about 42, 43, and then I went and got it tested with a mask on where that measures your oxygen and your carbon dioxide going in and out and the energy output. And I'm at 52. So it's not a very accurate measure. Nonetheless, you look at it, do you maintain it? Because over time, it goes down. So the older you get, the less it goes down. And if you can keep it up in the 40s and 50s for longer, it's going to be better for your health. So that's the one thing I follow. But, there are some people who are driven by the numbers and they like to follow their steps and things like that. It has no meaning for me.
What about resistance training? Optional or non-negotiable?
Strength training is very important. And it's very important, especially before you get to 55, 60, where you're losing about 10% of your muscle mass per decade. And so you do need to strength train to intentionally try to retain that muscle mass. So it's a very important element. And again, this is one where it's probably not good to wait till you're beginning to lose, and you need to build it up beforehand. And, to go back to a theme we had earlier, use it or lose it. If you don't strengthen your muscles, you will lose them, and then you'll be a little more frail as you grow old. And so for me, I like to do aerobic exercise. I like to bicycle, but you could swim, you could run, you could cross country ski in the winter. Now that there's a lot of resistance training in riding or running for your lower body, but not for your upper body. And, I'll confess on this. I can't stand lifting weights. I never liked it. When I was a swimmer, I never liked it. And but I have to lift weights now. I just have to intentionally, because I don't go swimming in a pool. My main activity is riding a bike. And so I have to intentionally lift weights every other day. So that's what I do.
When did you start that?
I don't know, about a decade ago.
Have you seen your strength
Yes,
improve?
I could definitely. I had a bike injury about a year and a half, 2 years ago that hurt my shoulder and fractured a couple of ribs. And so I can't do push-ups anymore. I used to do 25 push-ups every morning. So I do other strength training.
What is the minimal effective dose for strength training?
I don't know actually what it is, but lifting weights, biceps, triceps, the shoulder girdle.
I haven't read it yet, but there was a paper that was just published by Brad Schoenfeld. I think that's his name. Schoenfeld is certainly his last name. His first name, I think, is Brad. But it was essentially about that, like about the minimal effective dose for resistance training to see gains when time is limited. And so it's something that I definitely want to dig deeper into.
I think as long as you feel like your muscles aren't deteriorating and you can lift the same amount of weight, whether it's a table, a couch, or things like that.
It's just so safe and so beneficial to myriad systems in the body. And
yes,
it's like
absolutely.
builds confidence, improves well-being, important hormonally, great for fighting off frailty.
But a lot of
bones.
people do it alone as opposed to doing it with other people. So, that's one of the things about being a gym rat. I think tends not to be too social. At least that's my experience.
Everybody's talking today, particularly within the context of building strength and muscle, about protein, and you've referenced protein a few times, but it's hard to gauge your stance on it. Do you think the current fervor surrounding protein is
absurd?
You think it's absurd? Okay.
Yes. So unless you're training for an Ironman or some other, or you're some professional athlete, 1, and then as you get older, 1.2 grams per kilogram. So if you're a 70-kilogram person, we're talking about 70 grams a day. And here's a dirty little secret. Most Americans get that without even thinking. And we do have, as I mentioned, a lot of fiber deficiency in the population, but we don't have a protein deficiency that's massive. There are some people who do have protein deficiencies, and especially if you're vegan, you have to really worry about the protein you're getting and plan a little bit better. But from a population standpoint, I'd say I can be pretty confident almost all your listeners get enough protein. We eat, as Americans, about 10 ounces of meat a day, all right, 225 pounds per year. Okay, 10 ounces a day. you're getting enough protein. That alone is 70 grams. So an ounce of most meat is 7 grams. Okay, it's not. Stop worrying. I wouldn't. This idea of counting macronutrients. It seems crazy to me. Crazy. So I wouldn't worry about it. Forget the protein.
You've been steeped in public health for decades at this point. What do you make of the new dietary guidelines suggesting that we target between 1.2 and 1.6 grams per kilogram?
Too much. You don't need that much. And it's not cheap, right? Especially if you're doing the RFK Jr. food upside down pyramid, right? You got this big hunk of steak. That ain't going to be cheap, right? You don't need that. And I think that's a mistake.
What do you think the potential? I mean, are there any potential harms?
There are some harms, especially if you have any renal function issues and others. But
if you're healthy, if you have healthy kidneys,
if you have healthy kidneys, it's probably not a problem. But too much meat, especially red meat, with the saturated fat, is a problem because we know it's highly correlated with and causal of cardiovascular disease, stroke, heart attacks, and things like that. So that's one of the. There are 3 or 4 problems with the RFK Jr. food recommendations. One is the excessive protein, the heavy emphasis on more meat and beef tallow and things like that. Big mistake. Raw milk, big mistake. Seed oils, big mistake. Just nonsense, their point on seed oils. So those are my 4 big things that I don't agree with them on. But most of the other stuff is pretty good. More fruits and vegetables. Plant protein is just as good as animal proteins. More fiber. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that the seed oil issue becomes moot when you prioritize mainly whole foods. I mean,
yes.
There are no seed oils naturally found in broccoli, in avocados, right. In nuts and seeds.
But if you are using olive oil, which mankind has been using for millennia and millennia, it's expensive, and so not everyone can afford that. If you have money and you can afford, yes, olive oil is your best oil, just do it, okay? But many people can't, and therefore, you have to have options. Canola oil is perfectly fine, and you shouldn't demonize people who use canola oil because they can't afford other oils.
Oh, you absolutely should not demonize anybody for using it. I think the utility of added oil, I've kind of changed my own view on this. I don't think that I think that one ought to minimize their intake of added oil. I think get all the fats that you need from whole foods.
Well, what if you want a salad dressing? That's added olive oil. It's good.
Yeah, olive oil is great. That's why I think if you're going to add an oil, it should be extra virgin olive oil. Because, have we forgotten about the Mediterranean dietary pattern?
We know works.
That we know works, right? And they're not using canola oil in the Mediterranean region.
Yes, but that's
historically.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
It's also a lot cheaper there, by the way.
Is it?
Yes.
Yeah. No, super. Such interesting. When you really get into the nitty gritty and the details, I think it's it just is fascinating. And I think most people today are distracted by the minors when the majors are plain to It's like eat real food.
Right. I totally agree with you. That's a very good rule. So one of the things I hate is going to the grocery store because so much of the grocery store is crap. And there's one particular aisle that it just makes me mad, which is the soda. So there's usually sodas on one side and the pretzels and potato chips and on the other side. And it's like, there's nothing good here. No one, this aisle should not exist, and no one should go down this aisle. But, and
sounds like a pretty good aisle to me. Soda and chips, yeah.
Well, soda is all it is sugar water, right? A 12-ounce can of Coke is 10 teaspoons of sugar with no nutritional value. So all of that stuff is mainly sugar, no nutritional value. And the nutritional value you get because they add these electrolytes. You don't need to drink Gatorade to get electrolytes. And then the chips and the pretzels and all of the packaged cookies and stuff, they're not healthy. The advantage of some of those chips is that they're actually very low calorie.
Yeah. Well, how do we? I mean, you're an expert in health policy. You mentioned that children today are consuming what 70% ultra processed foods.
Yes.
Adults are consuming slightly less, 60% by
Yep.
calories. So what do we do then to help incrementally like shift what it is that the public is consuming more towards these whole foods?
Well, this is where I actually, again, I do agree with RFK Jr. because this is a rotten ecosystem in food, right? We heavily subsidize corn and soybeans and rice and wheat that go into ultra-processed foods. They make them addictive through their magic combinations of fat, salt, and sugar. We have to regulate those things, and they have made us fat. You know, if you look back at old magazines, for example, or old yearbooks, go back to your high school or college and look at the old yearbooks, there weren't obese people. I mean, occasionally there was someone, but not the way there is today. And that is not because of genetics. This is all environmental, and they've made food addictive. They've made food terrible from a dietary standpoint to increase obesity. They make a lot of money, and all the costs are laid on society or individuals. That is a very bad equation. We cannot actually, pull our hair out. And this is one area I disagree with RFK Jr. He thinks it's all individual responsibility. No. You are in an environment that makes it way cheaper and easier to eat that kind of food, and then we blame those people. That's, I think, a mistake. As a society, we have done things like food subsidies to encourage that terrible food environment. And so we need to undo those things and fix it. And, I think we should be subsidizing fruits and vegetables, among other things.
Do you think change ultimately has to come from Washington or the food industry or some combination
Well, the food
of both?
industry are not going to voluntarily do it. Yeah, they voluntarily made this problem because they make money and they don't bear the cost of the harms that they create, just like the cigarette companies.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I formerly would have described myself as a free market guy, but when you let the market decide, I mean, it's like pesticides and everything.
Right,
It's,
exactly.
Fried chicken served on a sandwich of donuts,
Right.
Like you see these like horror stories that make their way across my X feed. And it's just like, it's no wonder that so many people struggle with their weight. We've inherited an environment that makes overeating the path of least resistance.
And the cheapest path. And that's 100% right. And I think we have to undo that collectively, which is, how does that happen? By regulation, by taxation. How did we get rid of cigarettes? Or we didn't get rid of them, but substantially reduce the population. It used to be nearly 50% of the adult population smoked. Now it's closer to 10%, right? We taxed it. We pushed it outside. We said you couldn't do it in lots of places. We made it socially unacceptable. We have to do the same thing,
Do you think there should be a tax on products?
I've been a big advocate
added sugar
on the soda tax in Pennsylvania. I think it's worked really well. For one thing, it's helped subsidize parks so kids can play. It's helped subsidize daycare. So I think those are good things. So you can have pluses by reducing people's consumption. I don't remember exactly the number, but something like 34% decrease in consumption of sodas, and it's increased positive things like school, preschool, and parks. So net, all a good thing.
And what do you think as, you put out this wonderful book, Eat Your Ice Cream. We reach a lot of people with this podcast. I feel like I try to straddle that line between, working within the wellness industry, but then also bringing into it rigorous science and not, overhyping, making crazy claims and bringing, a voice of reason to this industry. What can we do from within to help right the ship?
Look, as individuals, right, the main thing we can do is use our purchasing power to support good things, right? You're too young, but in the old days, right, there was no organic nothing in the supermarket. That's completely changed. There was only iceberg lettuce. That's completely changed. So lots of things have happened by people purchasing and driving the industry to diversify. So I think that's, as an individual, eating well is good for your body, your family's body. It also turns a signal through the marketplace that this is actually what people want. And we're seeing some of that. Look, the consumption of sodas has gone down. We're now at 1 soda per person per day, which is way down from what it used to be. Similarly, alcohol consumption is down. Lots of things have actually gone in the right direction. Food, unfortunately, because of the pricing issue, has not decreased the same way. And I think that's in large part because of the subsidies. You want to subsidize the farmers? Okay, but we shouldn't be subsidizing them to produce things that actually make people obese and therefore sick, and we pay for it through higher health bills. That seems like a crazy way of helping farmers.
What do we currently subsidize that we shouldn't?
The 5 big items are corn, soybeans, wheat, rice, and I forget the 5th on that list. Yeah, those are the 5 big grains that they subsidize in the Midwest. And look, I'm all for farmers, being supported, but being supported in a way that hurts the rest of the population is not a good formula, and it's bad policy.
Amen. Yeah, and corn, it's not like we're subsidizing organic corn, putting ears of fresh organic corn into the homes of every American. It's like high fructose corn syrup. It's all the corn derivatives.
Exactly, that you put in ultra-processed foods, 100%.
So in a way, we're subsidizing ultra-processed foods, but corn is the proxy.
That's why that's why they're low cost.
Wow. Yeah, I would love to see more subsidies for fresh fruits and vegetables, for meat,
nuts.
eggs.
There's all sorts of things. Exactly.
Man, are you optimistic?
I will say I'm mildly optimistic, and I'm mildly optimistic because I do think MAHA is largely pushing in the right direction. And for one, the other thing that I actually like is they're pissed off about the pesticides business and the fact that Trump is not taking the pesticide seriously and actually protecting glyphosate. And I think that they're worked up about it is good. There are other things about MAHA I don't agree with, especially the vaccine side. But that aspect, I think that's a positive. The clear recognition that a lot of the health problems we have are derived from obesity, as that expands, I think is going to be push the country in a more positive direction. Unfortunately, there's still billions and billions being made by Cargill and Pillsbury and all the other companies, and also the fast casual food that tends, McDonald's and stuff.
It's so true.
People like the fries there, but that's not even potatoes. I mean, they're not made from potatoes.
What are they made from?
They're an extract of potatoes.
Interesting. So. Wow. Fascinating. Who'd you write your book for? Who'd you write Eat Your Ice Cream for? For people that you feel need more ice cream in their lives?
No, it's mostly people who are fed up with the wellness industrial complex and want a little sanity. So I think it's mostly for the sane consumer who would like, well, what should I do if I don't want to make this a centerpiece of my life? I do want to be healthy, but I've got lots of other things that I'm actually committed to doing.
Well, what angers you most about the wellness industrial complex? Which I love the term, but to be fair, the wellness industrial complex also includes gyms. It includes the organic industry.
Well, I'm not sure. So here's the 4 things. People who say that you should be obsessed and really focused. It should be a primary focus of your life. So Peter Attia at one point in his book says something like, outlive is our only goal, or something crazy like that. Baloney. Second, people who almost always talk about wellness in a sort of denial, self-deprivation kind of way, should be actually something that makes you happy. You're going to have to do it for decades. You cannot do it. You cannot self-deny yourself for decades. I mean, we know this because, well, our New Year's resolutions that are about denial, we give them up in just weeks. The third thing is this idea of biohacking. I don't even know what the fuck biohacking is, all right? You think you're smarter than evolution and thousands and tens of thousands of years of nature figuring it out? I doubt it. And so I'm not a favor of that. And almost all of the influencers out there have big conflicts of interest. They're selling you something. They're selling you a laboratory test. They're selling you, a supplement. I have none of that. I'm just looking at the data and telling you, here's what's reasonable to do. Here's what's probably dangerous to do. And that's who I wrote it for. People who want that, who sort of want a sane understanding without it coming to dominate their life.
Amen. So it sounds like the bone that you have to pick is really with the influencers.
Correct. They're the primary, but they're the people who are getting all the oxygen.
Well, I would agree with you there. I mean, I think that there are many bad apples, and I think ironically, the more prominent a persona is, the more skeptical I view their intentions.
I view it like a fad. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Probably not telling you the right thing to do. That doesn't mean that some of the stuff that they say isn't right, or in the right direction. But, it's also encrusted with a lot of other nonsense that you should probably ignore.
No, I agree with that. Yeah. I think it's a huge problem. Attention is currency today, and the more attention somebody has, the more they're typically able to commercialize on that. Mm-hmm. Whether you as the user, the listener, the viewer, the follower are aware of it or not.
Right. I agree. And so I guess I wrote for the people who don't want to zoom in on that, but want some good advice and want to know, there's so much out there. They want to know, all right, what do I do, and what's the right thing to do that has some proven science behind it.
Yeah, and the big levers. We like to say on this podcast, we want to major in the majors, not the minors. So the big levers, what would you say?
The 6 are, don't do unreasonable, risky things. Of course, we all take risks. We drive a car. I have a Vespa-like scooter I go around in. Do reasonable risks, but don't ignore your vaccines. Don't ignore your cancer tests. Second, social interactions. Prioritize your friends and family and your casual, weak connections. Really important. Cognitive. Keeping your brain sharp, right? Get a lot of education, pushes out the age at which, cognitive decline will happen. Challenge yourself, take on new hobbies, new activities. Eat well, and my main things are stop with the sodas, minimize your ultra-processed foods as much as possible. Focus on more fermented foods, kimchi, yogurt, kefir, alpine cheeses, and then focus on fiber. And then exercise, you got to do aerobic exercise, you got to do strength training that we mentioned, and then also yoga and for flexibility and balance. And the last thing is sleep. Don't, I'm going to go on 4 hours of sleep. I'm just going to drive myself. Again, here's where nature is like, oh, really? You think that's optimization? Let me tell you something. Sleep has been preserved for millions of years. And that tells you it's super important because you are at highest risk when you're at sleep, right? And think of the African savanna, right? When are you at your highest risk? You're unconscious and you're there. All your predators are coming after you. The fact that we keep it and have kept it tells you it's super important. We may not know all the ins and outs of it, although we're beginning to discover them. So it's super important, and you have to prioritize it. There are some people who are short sleepers. They're genetically different than us. They have different genes on this. That's 1% of the population. Most of us are 7 to 9 hours. Figure out how long you need. I'm about 7 hours and 15 minutes, 7 hours and 30 minutes is what I need per night.
I'm like a 9-hour a night sleeper for the most part. Yeah, I mean, what an egregious error on behalf of evolution it would be if we spend a third of our lives asleep, and it's
not helpful.
Not helpful, right?
But yes, you spend a third of your hours. It has to be essential. That's what it tells you.
Amen. Well, this was so fun. Very, very cool getting to know you.
Thank you for having me on the show. Yeah. And good questions.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. I've got one last one for you, but before we get to that, where can people pick up your book, which I know is out, and where can they connect with you on social media?
Social media, I'm terrible at whatever my handles are. You can get the book at any bookstore, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and lots of neighborhood bookshops.
I saw you did a video recently on why matzah is maybe not the best thing for our digestive health. Was that?
It's terrible for the digestive health. So you have to pair it with dried fruit that give you the extra fiber, prunes.
But we've been eating it for millennia.
We have, and it's terrible. It's called the bread of affliction for a reason. It afflicts the soul for 8 days.
Oh man, it's so true. It's so true. But it does remind me of my childhood. So I buy it once a year with a little horseradish. It's actually pretty good.
Yes, I agree with that.
Very cool. Well, the last question that gets asked to everybody on the show, Dr. Emanuel, what does living a genius life mean to you?
A genius life?
Yeah.
I don't know what a genius life is. I know what a good life is, where a good life is about trying to make the world better. So when I was in college, I was actually quite, depressed is not the right word, but I was struggling with what am I going to do and how am I going to make a difference? And I one day walked out, there was a bird sanctuary near my college, sat on a log and was thinking hard about that question. And, I figured, I'm in this world. I've inherited lots of good things in this world, American democracy. I'm at a great college, lots of smart people helping me, lots of great books to read. My job is to try to make the world better. And I think that's mostly what really, really good people do. And they try to go around making the world better. One of my big heroes is Ben Franklin. And, we all say, bifocals. And he's one of the greatest inventors of all time. He's still in the top 5. Also a great scientist, won the equivalent of the Nobel Prize, great politician, great civic organizer. He founded the University of Pennsylvania, the first hospital in the United States, etc. He really was a genius. And his motto was, be useful. And by useful, he meant help the world. And here's one of the interesting, he invented all these things. He's got at least 10 or 12 inventions to his name that we still use, lightning rods, etc. He never patented one. He said, I give it to the world. Someone will improve it. I've benefited from other people's inventions, other people's contributions. And I think that's a kind of psychology we all ought to adopt. That's what a genius life would be. Give it to the world.
Give it to the world. Amen. I love that. Beautifully put. Reminds me of the Mr. Rogers. Was it Mr. Rogers? Find the helpers.
Oh, good.
He always said.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you're a helper. So thanks for coming out. Thanks for sharing your wisdom with us. Thought-provoking, and again, love the title of your book, Eat Your Ice Cream. I'm going to go eat some.
Good.
It's ice cream on the menu tonight, thanks to you. Thanks for the permission. Thank you guys for listening. Share this episode with friends and loved ones that you think may benefit from it. And hope you enjoyed. I'll catch you on the next episode. Peace. Hey, if you liked that video, you need to check out this one here, and I'll see you there.